Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have five novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. Hello again. So today I am interviewing the lovely Suzanne Groves. Hey, Suzanne.
Hello.
It is, so she is she has years and years, you can't tell by looking at her, but she's actually had a really long career in marketing and communications. And she's an award-winning author. And she and I, Suzanne and I, are in a writing group together, which is so fun because, when I was first thinking about interviewing you, Suzanne, of course, I was into the book that we're reading. But no, that's not the one. It's not out in the world yet. So we'll talk about it though. We'll talk about the books that are underway. So she is an admitted research junkie. She spends her time working on family genealogy for herself and friends. That's a cool thing to do for friends. That's very nice. And she's an editor, and I said a writer. She has two grown children. She loves to travel. This is all from her bio. She loves to travel, and but they have a feisty German Shepherd and a bossy. All cats are bossy, though, aren't they? They're
Yes,
yeah, they're just pretty much. Mine stopped talking to me for a week the first time I took a long trip. He just wouldn't talk to me. He just put his tail up, like,
yep,
you left me. So,
they do that.
so the one thing I wanted to start with, because this really cracked me up in reading your bio, that you're known as an emu whisperer. Okay, so you just have to tell us the story behind that.
I'm kind of a general animal whisperer, but in 2016, my husband and I got married and we took our honeymoon in Sonoma. We were staying in the guest house of a working winery. And they were just lovely people, and they had lots of animals on the property, including this 8-year-old emu named Ishi. Now, her parents, they had her parents too, but they had been killed when she was a little one by
Mm,
coyotes. So they were pretty protective of her.
mm,
Anyway, the first night that we were there, they were sitting up on their deck and I was down on the ledge. They wanted me to feed Ishi. And so Michael, the host, brought me a loaf of white bread. And, she came walking over to me and kind of looking at me, and they're kind of scary and they're big. And so I just sat very calmly and I was kind of tossing the bread at her. I didn't even know if I wanted her very close to my hand. My
mm.
husband went in, got some tongs from our kitchen. So I started feeding her with tongs. That was night one. Night two, took the same position. Everybody's up above watching. She plopped all over to me. Same thing. I feed her. Day three, she's now gotten very comfortable with me because I'm talking to her. And so I'm now feeding her with my hand, and she's close enough that as they're filming up above me, I reach out and gently put my hand on her back. And she kind of gave me the side eye. And then she kind of leaned forward and I petted her. And they were gasping because they said in the 8 years that they had had her, never once were they able to touch her.
Wow. How
I
how
know.
big is how big is an emu? Emu.
They're about as tall, they're about 5 feet plus tall, and
Wow.
they can hurt you with their wings or with their beak, and they're kind of frightening looking. But I now in my backyard have we moved and I've got geese and I've got ducks and I have got turtles and I have got
Mm.
crows, and I feed all of them and they all know me. And so my husband just laughs and he's like, "Yep, she's the animal whisperer, but it started
She
with the emu."
she is. Crows are so smart, aren't they? They're
They are.
amazingly smart. I've watched them um, form on the ground in a V, and the leader is heading for the garbage pail, and they're all behind the leader in this V shape, and they're marching forward. And
Yeah.
I stopped. I looked at him and I said, "You're not getting my garbage." No. And he just stood there looking at me. He didn't seem afraid. He's just like, "That's what you think, lady." You know?
Yeah.
So, you have an amazing memoir out, and it's about a painful time in your life, right? So, like, why? Well, tell us how that came about. Why did you decide to write it? How was the experience?
So,
I'm sorry.
I grew up the daughter of a narcissist father, abusively narcissistic. Um, he was also a sex addict. So
Mm, mm,
for the 53 years that I continually tried to have a relationship with him, tried to be the good girl, tried to win unconditional love from him. It was just the goalposts were always moved. It was never good enough.
mm,
The gaslighting, the mind games, through all of it. Um, and I just kept believing it was my fault, that he was right and that I was wrong. And my mother was somewhat complicit in all of this. So it wasn't until um 2022 I had lost my father the prior November. He passed. My mother, who had dementia, Alzheimer's rather, was in a memory care facility and she died 2 months later. I had suspended all contact with my father 4 months before he died, unless it had to do with my mother. I was responsible really for both of their care. Um, After both of them died and I had taken care of most of the business things that needed to be taken care of, I sat down to start writing because I really was trying to make sense of my life. And I was trying to make sense of the effect of his narcissistic abuse on me and how it affected every relationship that I had and potentially would continue to have unless I
mm,
addressed it. So I
mm,
started writing it. It's written sequentially with my first memory at age 4. It took me about 4 months to write the first draft,
mm.
and then I sat on it. And there was a lot of tears shed on the keyboard as I was reliving some painful memories. I had a writing coach at the time. She's no longer my writing coach, but in group, she would challenge me, saying, "How could you possibly remember in such exquisite detail these vignettes beginning when you were a little girl?" And my response was simply, "Be glad that you don't have those kind of memories that are so seared into your soul that you will never forget them, no matter what." I completed the book. I sat on it for a while. I had it professionally edited. I had some people close to me read it, and they thought it was really important. My editor read it and suggested that it didn't really end on a high note. I needed to take readers on a journey, which I did, but I needed to give them hope at the end. And that was
Mm.
probably the most difficult chapter for me to write because I was digging in so deeply to find out what hope did I get from all of this. And if nothing else, it was the realization that it never was about me. It was never about me. It was about him. And so I wrote it, and then I didn't know if I was going to publish it or not. And I
Mm.
vacillated. And finally, I decided I leaned heavily into Lamott's words of, if you didn't want me to write about you, you would have treated me differently. And then I had some misgivings about speaking or writing ill of the dead until I had the epiphany that I'm writing the truth of the dead. As many reviews have said, this book has helped a lot of people understand what they didn't know that they were dealing with. And they also felt like they weren't alone, like they were seen for the first time.
Wow.
And that is the greatest gift as a writer, to know that your words have affected somebody at such a profound level that it helps them to heal.
Yes. That's an amazing thing. It's happened to me with someone will come up to me and say, I've never told anybody this, but after reading your book, yeah, just a
Yeah.
wonderful feeling. Do you have a copy of the book handy by any chance?
I do not. It's in the other room.
all right. We'll make sure that we'll make sure that you guys see the cover before you see the interview. I'll post it. I'll make sure I post
I
it.
do want to say one thing about the cover. Um, it is actually a painting that I commissioned from a dear friend of mine who's an abstract artist and who knew my
Hmm.
story. And so it's very deliberate that it starts at the bottom. It's very dark and kind of brooding, and then it gets a little bit coppery, and then it gets up into the white. But on the kind of at the edges, it almost looks like it's burned. So it's as if to
Mm,
say, emerging from the darkness into the
mm.
light. But 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 those memories are all going to be there, even in the light.
Even in the light, it's something that we carry with us. It's just that I was remember reading a article by a woman who was suffering from the same thing I was. And she said at one point it was 95% of my life. Now that I've healed, it's 5% of my life. But it's always going to be there, right? And the younger you are, the more it's burned into your DNA. Yeah.
Yep.
So tell us the name of the book.
The book is called You'll See, a story of narcissistic abuse, survival, and my journey to understand.
That's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So now you've you've taken a turn.
Oh, yes. And I didn't use my signal.
Tell our audience, because right now you have a book with the publisher waiting to be published, and you're working on a prequel to that book as we speak. So can you, without spoiling anything, can you tell our readers what they can expect when this new wonderful book comes out?
It's called The Pebble in the Pond, A Story of Stewart's Landing. It takes place beginning in 1978 in a fictitious town outside of Richmond, Virginia. So it's very Southern. It's very much a Southern story. And it's really about, um, I delve into the complexity of women's relationships and friendships, which I believe are much more complicated than those between men and women. Um, it's it's kind of an examination of um, different class behaviors and expectations, old guard tradition versus progress and breaking tradition. There is some heartbreak. There is a mystery that unfolds. There is a lot of whimsy. Um, and at the end, it's really about how, despite what we've been led to believe, a single person, through their authenticity and their humanity and their kindness, can, like a pebble in the pond, have a ripple effect on the community around them and
Mm.
change the world around them for the better.
Yes, I so believe that. Yes, you can. And when you're healed and well, you can have an amazing impact. And when you're not, you can still have an impact. It's just that's not a good one. So getting well is so important. So why the shift? When you think about your own writing career, your own writing desires, um, did you always see yourself as a fiction writer and it just took
Always.
time? Or
I,
tell us about that.
I mean, I've been a writer since I was a little girl. It started with winning a poetry contest at my elementary school when I was in second grade. Not that it was particularly stiff competition, but I won. And I was told by my third grade English teacher that I had a real talent. And I'd always been an avid reader. And so I always wrote. Um, I would make up stories. And then in high school, I kind of made a turn into journalism, and I assumed that that
Mm,
would be how I would make my living. Started in the journalism school at the University of Texas at Austin, and quickly switched over to English, while also writing for the Daily Texan. And through that, I was blessed to have a creative writing professor, um, Dr. LaSalle, with whom I subsequently had a one-on-one honors tutorial by invitation. And he
mhm.
really recognized my talents in the short story genre. And I was prolific. I not only wrote poetry in college, but I wrote short stories. And up until I started and finished The Pebble in the Pond, since I was in college, I've started and not finished five other manuscripts, largely because I
Mm,
just didn't know where I was going.
mm.
But it's always been in my blood. Um, and I just love creating worlds in which I'd like to live.
Yes. Those of
Well,
us who've
also,
experienced trauma, that's one of the things we do is we create worlds that are better than the one that we had been. And you also have such a wonderful sense of humor.
thank you.
So I love that. I admire that so much. It's something that I lack in my writing and I struggle with in my writing. And you have such a wonderful
Thank you.
sense of humor, which gives us a nice breather as a reader, because you're into all of this, everything that's so important, and then there's something funny and light that could, give you a little breather. So that's wonderful.
Well,
Um,
I will say in
mhm.
Pebble, there is it's pretty snark drenched in some of the cat fights. And then, oh, that's all I'll say. There's some pretty biting humor in it.
Yes, I think that's one of your great talents that you do snark really, really well, which is which is fun. So many of our viewers are writers, or fellow writers, and you're an editor and a successful writer. If you had to give, like one piece of advice, and also you're a marketing and communications expert, so the advice could be about anything that you think would be helpful to our writer friends out there.
So I will say, number one, use your voice. It's yours. Use it. Say what you want to say. Say how you want to say it. It's up to you. And then a piece of advice that I got from a very dear friend as I was starting on my fiction again, and I was kind of lamenting at first, it was kind of stop and start. And she said to me, don't be afraid of yourself.
Mm,
And I thought that that was the most profound piece of advice because I realized I was holding back with that, again, the vestiges of trauma. What are people going to think? Is this not good enough? Is this cliched? Is it whatever? And I realized I was standing in my own way. So get out of your own
mm,
way, lean into your voice, and just page by page.
yeah, writer's right. You got to plunge
Writer's
in.
right.
You have to plunge in. I love that. Don't be afraid. Get out of your
Don't be
own way.
Don't be
Use your
afraid of
voice.
yourself. Hmm.
Yeah, that's great, great advice. So one of the things, this is what are you reading? What are you
Okay.
writing? So we have to talk about reading. So was there a writer at some point in your journey that had such a really big impact on you as a writer? Something about a book or an author?
I've been reading since I was four.
Hmm.
I will, so I've, and then I was an English major, so I've studied all the greats. Um, Shakespeare ruined it for all of us because he
Hmm.
covered every plot line there is. I
Hmm.
really, early on, not early on, I would say probably 15 years ago, I was really taken with Kristen Hanna because I was so appreciative of her exploration of women's relationships.
Hmm.
And I just felt that it was done in such a thoughtful, intentional way versus just kind of stereotyping. And so I loved that. Natasha Lester she writes historical fiction, primarily set in London, New York, or Paris during, the turn of the century, 19th to 20th century, which is my sweet spot. And what I love about her writing is that she's always got several different storylines kind of going, and you don't know how they're all going to converge, and then magically she makes it
Hmm.
happen. And then
Hmm.
finally, Leanne Moriarty. I just can't get
Yes.
enough of her work. She writes with a little bit more darkness that I'm wanting to tap into in my own fiction. Um, But again, her ability to write with an ensemble of characters just blows my mind. And I think hers is a true, I really study her craft when I read her books.
Yeah, she's you've I didn't know the middle author that you talked about, but I the two they are just amazing, amazing authors that have had a big impact on me as well, and maybe on some of you. Have you read something recently that you could recommend to our audience?
Oh gosh. I'm reading so many works in progress for the two critique groups. I would say, I'm going to step outside of our publishing group for a second. And,
Mhm.
I tend to be a little bit of an iconoclast in that if something is getting too much hype, I might not want to partake in it.
Mhm.
But I just devoured about 3 weeks ago Mel Robbins' Let Them. It's essentially
Mm.
it's a life philosophy that honestly I wish she had written some 40 years ago. It would have changed my life.
Wow.
In that it's not just, it's not an apathetic, if people are going to treat you badly, let them. The second half of the book is let you. And it's all about just managing your own stress, your own self-esteem by acknowledging other people's behavior, good and bad, and then really focusing on your response and how you're going to move forward. And it, to me, was life-changing.
Yeah, yep. The only thing we can control is our response. And that's what gets us into trouble because we don't. So that's, yeah, I have to look
Well,
that
and her book actually doesn't just give that, time-worn advice, but it tells you how
how
and
to do it.
walks through various scenarios, which um, I mean, I was in awe. And now I listen to her podcasts periodically. There are so many books in the Black Rose writing family that yours, um, Cat Filers,
Mhm.
Del Blackwater, Cliff Garstang, Ross Hightower, the list goes on. But the one that really hit home for me again was Let Them.
Let them, let them. Well, now that you've got everybody intrigued, both wanting to read your memoir, but also anxiously want to hear how the progress for your next novel and when it might come out. So how can people find you?
You can find me at on Facebook, Suzanne Groves, author. You can
Mhm.
find me at my website, suzannegroves.com. Um, and you can reach me via email at suzanne.s.groves@gmail.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I know that you are going to reach out. You're going to, first of all, go and find Suzanne's book and you're going to buy it. You're going to write a wonderful review. I'm counting on you. And I know you're also going to be in touch with her. And when you do, please tell her that you met her on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Until next week, everybody, happy reading, happy writing. Bye bye.